We're going to be using the Plus Delta app. So here again, you can open this now. We will have a slide later on as well. But it is kind of nice to have the app up as the presentation's going. So if you have an idea of something, go ahead and post it up. We'll look at all those at the end of the presentation.
Did we got that? One more?
It'll come up again. We'll have it towards the end. So if you missed it, we'll have another slide. So membership. Hopefully all of you are members. If not, this is just some information so that you can become members. There's a lot of benefits to actually being a member. There's a lot of content online and learning that you can do on your own at your own pace, aside from being able to come to these events. So definitely try to do that. We saw the sponsor slide. So if you're interested in getting your name on that slide, contact Juan. His email is right at the bottom. There's some information about what it costs, $1,800 for the year. And for that, you're going to get 3 complimentary registrations to every event. So that in itself would almost pay for that cost. So it's a great deal for you. It's a great deal for us. It helps us put these events on, like I said. And then you're going to get your name on that slide at every presentation we give. And we are doing a lot of presentations this year. Training opportunities. So we're going to look at some of the events. The ones that are crossed out are ones that already happened. We see that we're at August 14th. That's this event. Next month, we're going to be down the road talking about hybrid big room. October is Congress, so hopefully you're going. And then November, we have quality and lean. And then in December, we'll have the psychological safety. So a lot of great topics to come. High performance training. Oh yeah, and then there's a high performance training as well. If you have not taken this training, it is great. I went through it myself. It really taught me how to be an exceptional leader, right? I mean, a lot of us probably already leaders, but what it's going to do is take your leadership to the next level. So definitely, that's coming up. So great. Congress. Who's all going to Congress? I'm going to Congress. Hopefully a lot of you are. October 22nd through the 25th in San Diego. Should be a great event. Hope to see you all there. All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Larry and Ron and let them present.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm Larry Summerfield. I'm with Bueller Engineering. And with my cohorts here, we're going to be talking about some new recommendations and some new innovations and tips and tricks for executing the last planner system in the design phases. So I'm going to let my cohorts introduce themselves.
Sure, yeah. Hi everybody, Justin Wise. I'm a principal from Stantec out of our Sacramento office, and I'm also an architect. Nice to see all of you.
And Ron McGlory with Bueller Engineering. Here in Sacramento, but been co-located for about 1.5 years in Santa Clara on the Sutter project.
That's what he tells his wife.
It's been working.
So to focus our attention, we're going to, in proper lean fashion, we're going to identify the problem first. So we've got a little breakout activity for you. You should find some Post-it notes and some, and break them apart as you need to. What we're looking for is, if you could make one improvement in the way design is delivered on collaborative projects, what would it be? So if you could please, write down anything you could think of, whether it's higher fees for designers or a commemorative plaque to an SEOR maybe, anything at all, really, that really bugs you about the way design is delivered. And be as blunt as you want, where you can take it. And what we'll do is we'll collect them and we'll use them for to help define our talk and possibly additional topics if we have time as we go out. So take a few minutes, 3-4 minutes, think about it. What really bugs you about the way design is delivered?
Larry, you want them up there when we're done?
Yeah, you could have your son do that.
Yeah. We'll have this kid in the red shirt's going to collect your skin.
I don't trust them.
Not because it's
No, you
young.
want to throw it?
No, I haven't thought of it.
All righty.
You had things that were on
I thought we started this as
Here you go. Intern. He doesn't know his name yet.
Okay, well, Noah does that. Some people are still writing. You're taking it easy on me. That's it. This is going to be overcooked. Noah, would you mind writing down a few of the things that people yell out in a second? Just the biggest letters you can. Let me have a couple of them. Give me a couple of them.
It takes too long.
Whoa,
I've been sitting on that all day.
I'm shocked. Somebody else.
Into the weeds too soon.
Into the weeds too soon.
Specifications come way too late.
Oh.
Having to do specs.
Having to do specs, right?
Nobody reads.
Last planners who don't advocate for their needs.
Shocked.
So quiet people over there, and then they come over you later and they go, I need this.
I didn't want to interrupt everybody, but I need this.
I couldn't do this, I didn't have that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Early engagement of all trades.
Yeah.
Similar to that, mine was more collaboration between the design teams and trades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Clearer expectations.
So I don't hear anybody struggling to come up with things. So we've identified that we have a problem, you know, and so we've identified our problem. But there's good news. There have been a lot of very smart people over the last half a dozen years at P2SL and other places who have put a lot of effort into coming up with new recommendations for applying the last planner system. Not changes in the last planner system, but recommendations for applying it proper or in the best way for design. So that's going to be the hours traffic of our stage. We're going to talk a little bit about these new documents that have been produced. And we're going to talk about how decisions release work in design phases, making durable decisions, and LPS planning for durable decisions. So we're going to walk our way through that, and I think we're going to find that we've got some tools that can help us solve some of those problems. So I'm just really quickly, these are the documents I'm talking about. P2SL has issued a 2020 current process benchmark document that goes through a lot of topics related to the last planner system based on how it's been implemented over the last several decades. And part of what they talk about is design. They talk about a lot of things. But we're going to be pulling out of that document the things that mostly apply to design. There's another really great paper by Stan Chu and Bruce Cousins, Last Planner System and Design, that also goes into a lot of the same topics that we're going to be talking about tonight. But they're great documents, and they are available at leanconstruction.org. So all these, smart people reimagining the design process and how to plan for it. I'm just going to throw out a couple of, Justin's going to dive into much more detail, but some of those basic principles are dividing design into two activities, ideation and production. There's actually two parts to design that often get blended. The idea of decisions releasing design work, and the idea of unreliable decisions being a prime source of schedule delay and rework in design process. So if you look at the things you wrote, a lot of them are based on either not having a good decision, or not having a decision at all, or having a poor decision. So that is what we're going to be covering today. And Justin's going to kick us off by telling us all about how design works and what releases it and what constrains it. So,
Sounds good.
take it away.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so that's design. Does that sound familiar? Does that echo some of the statements that were put up on the board by some of you? You know, it's kind of, this part, we like this part, right? This is when everything's been baked in. the decisions have been made, the battles have been fought. It starts to become linear, right? You could call it design development or detailed design or whatever you want to put to that. Sometimes you get it early and you can do schematic design. You've locked in those changes and it's all smooth sailing. But we're talking about the very early. That's what this presentation is going to talk to. We're talking about concept, validation, scoping, feasibility. God, I don't want to do this. Whatever you want to put to that, the scribble part here, it's high ideation. And every single time through this mess, you straighten out. But what we're talking about is how can you use the last planner system to deal with that part. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So starting out, if you try to take that nest there and you start to unravel it, what are the things that you're trying to do at the very beginning? Really what we do, the difference between design and let's say construction is, we're, instead of the flow of goods and materials, tangible things, we are the flow of ideas and information, so the intangible things. And so starting out, is there a process that you can do to take those intangible things and start to land them, right? And so taking this and developing it into inspire, ideate, implement, and then if you take that further and you start to look at it of, vision, a lot of us know what conditions of satisfaction are that come into that early goal setting. Value alignment, not only value alignment with the team, but value alignment to the end goals of the project, because if your values are different, then you're not in the same purpose there. And then understanding what are you doing? So current state, or what's our mission? Making sure everybody understands that fundamentally before you even put a pencil to paper or a mouse to your computer, I guess. And along with that can come, what are some benchmarkings? We'll talk about target value delivery versus target value design. And really, when we talk about the difference between that, one of the most important things is with the target value delivery is understanding that, that basis of design. Where's that coming from? What's the business case behind that? How new is that business case? And how relevant is that information still before we begin, right? Having that to begin with is key. And then future state, mapping that out with the big ideas, okay? What are these? And that gets into those big ideas turn into the big decisions. And that's what Larry was talking about is can we map that? Can we map those big ideas, land them as decisions? Because those are the things that are going to release the work. And then here we are, design state. So this is all the stuff that this is starting to become more tangible. And at this point, this is a good opportunity to roll in all of those additional stakeholders, right? We had the core team developed and who we knew the stakeholders needed to be at the beginning. We don't want to bring everybody in at once because some people might just be twiddling their thumbs. They don't have anything to do. We don't have anything to release them yet. But as we get to this point, there should be enough information where we can now implement and then bang, you're off, straight line. Next. So starting out, this is an actual example from a validation project that we did. And at the end of that, the team got together and did a reflection and said, okay, there was a lot of things we learned here. And could we create a checklist that helps us be better and faster next time around? So the product of this was the first 30 days, and I'm only doing a few snippets of that to kind of land these starting out points. But part of these it got split up into a day 1 task, day 10 task, day 20 task, day 30 tasks. Here are the things that we could be doing on each of those to start the week. And at the end of the 30 days, we're really in a much better position. A lot of the times, and I'm speaking from personal experience because I've experienced it, when you start out a project, that first month makes or breaks you. And a lot of the times, unfortunately, maybe we don't want to all admit it, but it's not a very efficient month, that first month. So these are the things that some ideas you could ask yourselves, like, do we have a program? Do we have a validated program? Do we have a program that's been already checked to the end users that we can bring in and give to the team right away? And if not, are we close to that? Do we want to actually wait for a few weeks maybe, get that going? Or do we want to bring in a limited team to validate that program first before we release it to the bigger team. And with that would come cost associated with that too. You know, owner, do you have a budget in mind? You know, what's your bottom line, right? We all talk about a target value and hitting that, but if you know what the bottom line is, and you know that from day one, when we get into these next stages of the nasty word of iteration that some of you don't like, we have something that we can check that process too. Otherwise, we could release our first iteration and be very high compared to bottom line.
These are the raw materials that Justin needs to make his product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you know, the schedule for speed to market. You know, what are the things that we can do now? Can we preload homework? Ron and Larry love to talk about homework.
Yep.
And can we preload homework heading into our first meeting, our first day of, so that we could actually poll the project either our first day or our second day, and pull it with some accuracy that we can then make predictable. Next. So, you know, part of this is there's a lot that's asked for in the teams, everybody, including the owner, because we all have a seat at the table here for what we're doing. And so when you think about things like a cost and a target value, hey, budget, target, alignment, and goal. If you have something in mind, can you share it, right? Can you share that early and let us work on that? Because if that comes late or like maybe halfway into this conceptual process, that can be a train wreck, you know? But oftentimes it's difficult because right here you need transparency. Transparency is required to show that bottom line. And you know, number two is not achieved without trust. So if you haven't taken, and you know, some people maybe scoff at the idea of onboarding, spending a day of time together to start out right. But when you talk about different disciplines and companies coming together, I mean, you could be different sovereign nations. you may be so far apart. So when you come together, taking the time to onboard together and to gel can really start to create that culture early on and can help with discussions like that, so that you have that trust and you can start out right. Next. Project charter captures that. So project charter is, how many are familiar with a project charter? So it's like your Bible, right? You know, it's your living document. You're going to start it out, and then you're going to develop it over the course of your delivery of your validation. You know, some of the first things that you want to do starting out right is right here. You know, your executive summary. Everybody should know what the high level goals are of the project. Your project definition. It should follow a SMART system, right? We want this project to be safe, and we want this project to be quick, and we want this project to be cheap. That's not really SMART. So you want it to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based, right? SMART system. The project plan, we already talked about the milestones, putting that in. And the risks, you could start out, if you have that fundamental information already and you've taken that time to prove out the program, you can already identify, probably day one, day two, you can start to identify risks and also opportunities and start that off. And so all that would go into your project charter and then be developed and checked in over the course of time. At the end, you have a very clear document to refer to. If anybody comes in new, which sometimes happens, especially on large projects, leadership switches out, you have something that you can give to them and help onboard them in very quickly. Next. So what we were talking about earlier is if we can come in kind of preloaded with some of these conversations, then we can start to look at milestones as key decisions instead of maybe generic design markers. So how many of you have done a 30% whatever?
Everybody.
Because when you get it, it is a whatever, right? I mean, I would challenge, if we went around the room, which would be a really fun exercise at one of these events, and we just asked everybody what goes into a 30% set, I'm going to tell you, we're going to get a unique answer from probably every person, and it might even start a little war, So instead of these percentages that all it means is, okay, this is when I was supposed to deliver it, I'm going to hit print, Maybe instead we want to look at it as what are we releasing? And if we look at it from, again, the idea that conceptually here, our release points are ideas and information. So then from a milestone standpoint, let's look at it as we're releasing decisions. And if we look at it from that way, this starts to make sense. Now, I'm going to go backwards on this because that's what we do. You know, we start at the end, we work back. And then I'm going to go forward, and it's going to make sense here. So right here, we've got our subsystem selection, structural, MEP. We're getting our tonnage in. We know how much air to put into spaces. To do that, there's probably going to be a county-approved entitlements and probably a design review board that has to take place. And that needs to come first, because if you don't get that approval, or at least some sort of acknowledgement that you're on the right track, it can throw off all of those calculations. So that is good. In order to also get to that number, you need the user-approved equipment requirements. I'm not talking about the small stuff. I'm talking about the really big stuff that's really spits out a lot of BTUs, potentially. And as things get smaller, they seem to get hotter. I don't really understand that, but that's how the world works. So, you need that information. And again, in order to get to this stage to release this, validated massing and stories, to do that, you need to know where the building's actually going to land, so you can know which direction it should go and what it should look like. And so from there, we put in target budgets, like so early on. But, again, if you've had that discussion and you know where your bottom line is, you could start to set that early and develop it, Remember, these are stretch goals. It should be painful to get to. Maybe, I'm not very good at stretching, but I still try, And so we can all be better, right? And as we stretch and gain more experience, we do get better. That's what that is. So starting that. And what really releases it all in terms of, if you've asked a designer what releases your work, it is the functional program and it is the validated space program. That gets it all going, We like to throw out words of like, hey, when can we freeze the floor plan? It's kind of a ambiguous term. Because what does that really mean, right? But if you look at it again from this way, if you have that, then you can get in your massing and stories, you can get in the equipment, you can get those approvals in place, and you know what you're doing. And we could then look at what does that release? It could release prefab early, it could release long lead items early, it could release on-site construction start early. This could release a lot of things. Next.
And I'll add one thing. When we talk about, takes too long or work being redone, it's because one of these steps got skipped. Do you know what I mean? It isn't that, the architect woke up at 10 o'clock and said, between his two cappuccinos and said, I feel like metal panel exterior today, not stucco. It's not like that. What it means is that somebody skipped a step. But the architects got to get it done, or the engineers have to get their work done, so they do what they can. But then when the real information comes out, it's a change. And that's why these milestones, if they're managed right, you'll get a more reliable output and fewer changes.
Larry knows I like cappuccinos. Okay, so a few things here that can help with this process when you're early. Ron's going to go over later. He's going to go over CBA. I'm going to go over set-based design. The difference is in the structure for it. Okay, and when you're doing set-based design, this is something that you can do really early on in the project. You can do it where the project is very fluid, very liquid. These are the things that you can do on the wall as we say napkin sketches, right? But if you have a marker board, you could do that too. And you can cycle that through in multiple sets and multiple sprints. So this is what you see at the top here this is a point-based system versus at the bottom is a set-based system. So I'm going to describe the set-based system first. You can see there, the idea is many ideas. We're starting out. Nothing's a bad idea. Who knows? Yep. Who knows what you might find? So, but you're not chasing them down into the X amount of detail. That would be insane and very expensive, right? You're doing it at a very high level, so you're landing many ideas very quickly. Then, through a process that the team develops of refinement, where you're checking it back to the conditions of satisfaction, the goals for the project, the criteria that everybody agreed would be important, right? You're eliminating those options and reducing them until you get to a decision you can lock in, right? And depending on the level of decision and design problem that you're facing, you may at that point, and in order to lock it in, you may be doing CBA at that point. It takes it up a notch, you know? It's kind of the difference if you look at like a root cause analysis and you say, hey, we're gonna do a 5Y, or we need to fishbone this sucker, right? It's a lot more detailed process that you pick. So you can use one to get to the other if you need to. Sometimes you don't even need the CBA, right? If you've done this correctly and weighted it correctly, you know, you're good. Now, level of accuracy, plus minus 10%, it's super early on. So good is 15%. You know, you're not going to hang your hat on this, but it's going to get you much closer, much faster. Versus a point-based system where you have one idea and you love this idea because your cousin's uncle's best friend's neighbor said it's great. And you're going to then defend that idea
To the dad.
5 steps in until a train wreck happens. And then guess what? You're going to go all the way back, hopefully not to square one, but you're going to be, we call that the negative iterations. Nobody wants to hear that, right? So this is a much more efficient system to allow you to have those discussions. Next.
So going back real quick, when you talk about the level of accuracy being 10 to 15%, do you see that represented on a spreadsheet somewhere? Is that just some amorphous idea that's floating around that we know we're only so accurate with our estimates? Or how do you represent that when you're talking to the team?
Yeah, so I mean, this gets into you know, the idea of continuous estimating, but really it's just a check on that. So it's like there's a comment here about systems and changing out, right? You know, you have a stucco system, you want to switch that out to a metal, or you want to switch it out to a faux metal, right? Something like that. And so from a systems approach, if we're staying within that framework and you're designing within those frameworks and not customizing everything, which, you know, why would we ever customize everything all the time? You know, if you're staying within that system, then it's pretty easy to get that costing at a percentage that you can hit there that's fairly reliable enough so you can see the difference.
Right, but I mean, you like have error bars on some of these line items? Or, because I know like when owners see a line item, it's like $232 million and 632 cents. They're like, well shit, that's pretty damn accurate right there, you know? And like there's no direct communicating of that percentage of accuracy and what might be some uncertainty, it seems like a lot of times.
Well, so the thing that always needs to go along with these is your assumptions, right? You know, so what's baked into that number, you know?
Yeah.
We're assuming X, Y, Z, and that has to stand against that. And if that changes, right, you decide to move away from that, you know, you would remove that opportunity.
Yeah.
Eventually, that would then go into a risk and opportunity log, right? But when you're chasing this right now, having assumptions assigned to it, and again, these are discussions that they don't take weeks. You know, these are discussions that you can wrap it up in just a few hours.
If you don't want to address it now, maybe we do it at the end. But from my lens, estimating at the very beginning instead of systems potentially going into much more detail. Granular detail at the beginning to get plus minus assumption of systems and things of that nature. And I'm just curious if, because you had mentioned that at the beginning on set-based design, we think in high aggregate. And one thing that's being experimented with in the industry right now is through systems analysis, coming up with a much more detailed estimate at the very beginning during set-based design. So instead of just saying, well, the mechanical is 30% over, what about the mechanical is 30% over?
Yes.
It's the return or the, you know, whatever it is. So just, you know, maybe something to maybe consider. Again, it's being experimented with, but there's some really great results and case study that's been very popular in the field.
You're an estimator, correct?
Yes, sir.
And also, you're an educator, correct?
That's correct.
It's great to hear these ideas. You know, it's great to, you know, having folks like you attend these sessions and can comment on what's next in line. You know, I wonder, if you can get to that level and you can get to it so quickly, right, and very efficiently through software or tech or some sort of innovation.
Or the brain.
Or the brain, right? You can get there that
If
way
you got
too.
experience.
Then, that's fantastic, right? Again, at the end of the day, we're just trying to get somewhere durable as quickly as we can,
Sure.
but making sure that we check all the right boxes, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add that, a lot of times when we're looking at multiple systems, we're getting vendor input, right? They want to get the job, they're going to give you some pricing, but you can bring in all different kinds of vendors on different systems. Like we use this for, we're doing set-based design for structural systems, and we'll have a number of vendors that will do a lot of work in order to make that alternative look appealing. And then once we have that, we feel like we have a pretty good price point when we're comparing costs. But more than that is comparing the advantages of the different systems, what provides most value.
And I agree with you, but one thing to be cognizant of is being on the GC side for 30 years, is that when we use the word vendor, you're either going to get two things, a low or a high cost. So there's that middle ground where whoever's doing set-based design has to take responsibility for what the market is and make that decision.
Yeah.
But anyway,
But the experience that you're talking about is key, right? Yeah.
Sorry, but
No,
It's a good point. Yeah.
We have plenty of time for Q&A and we want it to be a conversation, so this is good.
Okay. Great.
Along those lines, so Ron was talking about multiple sets, so you could, why not, right? If you have a system in mind and you can reach out, why not do that at the same time? While you're doing your set, you can have, 3 others, 4 others doing the same set, and then you get it back and, you can look at it, right?
Sure.
So that's another avenue. And then to your point about the vendors, if you have something that we talked about bringing in the right people at the right time. So if you have a system and you want to run a set, could it be a conversation where you're like, hey, we want to do this skin system or whatever, right? Could we? I know we don't have the framing contractor on board yet, but I think you have some ideas of who you'd like to reach out to and who you'd like to consider. Would anybody be open to actually coming to this, participating in this set that we're going to do, and helping advise it? So there's avenues for that too. Next, that's great. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I think we answered some of these already, but just questions that make you think when you talk about this is, who leads a design set, right? I'm not going to answer all these. These are just questions to get you kind of thinking a little bit. Is there a relationship between design sets and construction sequencing? Could sets be defined by cost and risk? Could they be defined by density? Are you talking about a single piece flow, or can you do a small batch flow? These are some of the considerations when you're doing set-based design. We're throwing this up here just in case it sparks creativity from you, and we want to talk about it later. But we've done this a few times at some of the design forum events in Chicago. These are actually questions from participants in the audience. Next. Here we go. Iteration. We're going to talk about the bad word, right? But so there's an iterative process. Now, do you need to iterate on everything? I would say no. And if you're starting everything as an iteration, then what are you doing? There's templating and standards. There are a lot of best-in-class examples out there that the team could use, right? And why not invest in that right away to attack your problem instead of making everything a first-time use? But within that, there is going to be eventually something that presents itself that will require a unique solution. And so for that, you do need iteration. You need an iterative process. But to check that process so that you know that you're getting to the point where you've reached the ultimate level of quality that this process can provide, and you're not taking it further and further, how can you check into that? So using a process approach, using a last planner system approach, again, if you've taken the time to understand your conditions of satisfaction, this is where you can go and you can do your first iteration off of that. And then, use a set-based design approach. It's a quick approach. It allows you to do a lot of things very early. And then you can test that to a target cost, right? And then the point here is to then pause in the iteration and evaluate the product. Did we achieve the goals as we defined them with this concept? And if you did, great, stop. Good job. If you didn't, then okay, you're going into a refinement. You're not starting from square one again, and you can do another iterative process. So in that way, really you can get to that refined decision, and you can document it. Are we saying it's always 3 iterations? No. But hopefully it's not like 5 or 6 iterations, right? At some point you need a metric that's telling you what your guiding light is and when enough is enough. Next.
Most industries call that prototype test process. Like the automobile industry, they make prototypes and then they test the prototype and then they refine the prototype. And at the point where the next improvement isn't worth the cost to make it, you stop.
Yeah.
Is basically
I had a question on the iterative process.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've experienced in the design process is that's where a lot of time gets lost in the design processes, this iterative. How do you start compressing that time and making the iterations? I'm not saying more or less iterations, but speed up the transmission between this firm, I'm waiting on an answer from this firm, and I need this from this firm. How do you speed that up?
Yeah, well, I would say that if you know what the key decision is that you're shooting for with that process, that defines your end goal. And so if you've had good conversation about what that is, you're focused. Now you can make it time-based. And we run a lot of our projects, we pull them right away and get those in. When you come up with this, you should pull those tasks and get them in. And then time-base them to that decision you're trying to make.
If I could add one on too, one way to cut that process time frame down is transparency. If a designer sits all alone and tries to make these decisions, it can take longer. But if you bring in the right people, it goes quicker. Many times I'll be working with one of our younger engineers and they'll say, I can't decide whether I should weld this or I should use screws. I go, well, call the framer and ask him what he wants to do. Don't make them build it the way you want to draw it the way they want to build it. And one conversation and the iteration stops. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if they kept playing with it, you could iterate forever, but make it transparent and it can cut those iterations down.
Yeah.
I think one thing to add to that too, what you're saying is, it's something I'm trying to convey up there is iterations in a silo. So, we're used to saying, someone asks you to do something and you're saying, well, it's going to take me, in your head, you're like, I got to draw the 3 details, it's going to take me 4 days. So you make a commitment to do it in 4 days. And the owner's going to say, what's happening in those 4 days? You're doing this all by yourself and you're creating this content yourself, and then we're going to look at it when it comes out at the end, and then we're going to have to go through another design stage. Plan, you check that, right? We're going through this cycle. Bring people in, right? Keep it simple. Bring in the minds that are around you. There's going to be more than you that have to decide whether that detail for the wall frame is going to work. There's a lot of people that are involved in that. Just don't be in a silo and do it simple. Use blue beam, write it on whiteboard, and all those ideas can be flushed out really quickly. You'll get there quickly.
Yeah.
It's not
Transparency.
Like, that detail to come back and see, like, that doesn't work. 4 days lost, another 4 days.
Yeah.
It's not efficient.
I think you want to frame it all the time with the set-based design. Those are the true north for the design team. All these visions or iterations should be within that criteria for the team. Try to pull back and look at the big picture.
So, thinking back of the 2 last mega projects, Cathedral Hill and UCSF, both of them did not use set-based design. And it was still a good process, but it didn't use set-based. And I think this is very forward thinking on set-based. One of the takeaways is the separation of estimating methodology and its understanding of that methodology from the design team.
Yeah.
And it created a silo just because there was a lack of, how do we report that you will understand? There wasn't, and again, we're all experimenting, right?
Yep.
But just to have an understanding of what is the methodology you're going to apply to the estimate. And are we then, is that estimating language, talking to the design team and giving them the information that's in their language, not the estimating language?
Yeah.
Because then that's where the silo begins, and people are starting to make decisions on something that it may not be reporting in a fashion that speaks the same language of the engineer and the design team, or even the owner for that fact. Because the owner has one way of communicating, architect has another way, engineers, and then the estimator, of course, have their way. And that's just an observation of maybe a way we can improve collaboration between set-based design and estimating design.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Wouldn't it be great if the designer knew a little bit about estimating, the estimator knew a little bit about design, right? Like, why couldn't that happen? Absolutely. And yes, selfishly, we are trying to push set-based design more. We had a fireside chat conversation about it in Chicago that got really intense. A lot of people with opinions. We're going to carry that conversation forward. So we do want to try to push that out a little bit more because it's not, it could be a lot more relevant to how we do our work.
And it's right to AI, to engineering models, cost models. It creates an avenue to expand in that realm.
Yeah. Awesome. So
I want to add one thing.
Oh, yes.
So based on just what you said, we had projects that were being constructed at the same time, 2 bed towers, same city, same general contractor, same architect, different trades, and different project managers. And in that set-based design for those 2 buildings, the lateral system for those buildings ended up different. And it was mostly because when you did the CBA, how you value different elements really comes down to the stakeholders.
Humanistic.
Right? And based on their bias or their experiences, they weight things differently. And so coming out of that, we had 2 different systems for very similar type of buildings. And both of them were successful. Both of them hit their budget and made their time frames. But I thought it was interesting that a lot of things being the same, the answer was different. Yeah.
People build buildings, not machines.
Yep.
So you need a system that fits the people.
Yeah. And what they value. Yeah. Yeah.
So we draw this all back. We talked about, we had that plan that showed the key decisions as milestones. We looked at an iterative process. If you put it together, you'd asked a question earlier, but how can you stay on track, right? So if you have that process in, these are your milestones. These stars here are your milestones. This is the information that you're conveying. This is the decision you're trying to release. In between those milestones, what's going on? That was weird. In between those milestones is that's where your iteration can happen, right? Checked with that criteria that we mentioned. And if you do that correctly, you're able to release those decisions and release that information. And if you don't do it correctly, or you speed it up, or you don't have the right pieces in place, you didn't take the proper time to do that, then my animation is broken right now. But what you would see is arrows taking you all the way back. And that's what we don't want to.
And you're going to take all those steps. It's whether you take them in an efficient way or whether you take them in an iterative way.
Yeah.
And do you mind saying a little bit about, if you're in a situation where you have a GMP type contract model, you have that block there for target budgets established. Is that kind of like where you're doing that, or is it before that or after that? Or?
Yeah, the target budgets here, the reason why that's so early is when you look at it from a approach standpoint, and if you're looking at it from a target value, then why can't you start out, instead of starting out way up here and assigning a contingency to it that then goes down as you make progress on the project, you're reversing that and you're starting really thin, and then you're looking at, okay, well, what are the risks associated with starting this thin, right? And that can come in really early, and you can do that. Then you can take the rest of the time during the validation and you can try to sort out those risks. And the ones that you can't sort out, now you have a good paper trail that everybody's been brought along with, and you can see what the value is on that, and you have a more predictable portion that you can assign into your contingency that the team can then choose to accept and bring into the project, right? You know, so again, it's just, and it's not, you know, doing this, it's a target, right? It's not an expectation, you know, and as long as the team is communicating and they're on board with this approach, you know, it's actually, it's easier to do that.
A lot of times that target budget is based not necessarily on what the designer's working on, but it's based on market costs and the business plan of the owner. You know, you don't necessarily need a complete set of documents to make a target budget. We should know what buildings cost, and we can set a goal, a stretch goal based on that and the owner's business plan. And then we'll design to that.
Well, Larry, to that point, I mean, the early on target validation or target cost is really, you know, based off of smart block and stacking. So it's like the information that exists in a Revit model at a conceptual level. We know what departments cost. They might cost, this department costs different than this department. This room type costs different than this room type, right? Focus on a repeatable process and, you know, put those other ones over the side that are uniques. And then you're able to get that durable cost a little bit sooner. And also, you know, yeah, part of it's based on historical costs, but it's also, you know, it's loaded with smart information. So you know what's in there.
Yeah.
From MVP systems in the wall to, you know, whatever the individual room requirements are.
You're not trying to determine what it does cost, you're trying to determine what it should cost.
Right.
An observation from UCSF, which was, it's been stacking all over the place, and I've been out of that loop for about a year, so it's really matured finally very well. The architect wanted department cost. After the master estimate was pretty much set. It's very difficult because number one, the master estimate and the trade partners were already set in their methodology. And then the owner said, what are departments costs? And it was a pain to reestablish the estimate, go back, and some were successful, some weren't. But then the conundrum was, how much is infrastructure? And where does infrastructure stop and the department start? And it was easy to count the doors and the wall protection, stuff like that. But then when you had mechanical systems, once it hits the ceiling, is it still OR or does it go into infrastructure? You know, and so it wasn't necessarily, you know, and not that it should have been figured out because it's new, right? It's a new concept. But those type of conversations, if it happened at the beginning of set-based design, it's just so much easier, and you get better information from it.
Well, it's all the same stuff we're talking about. I mean, whether it's an iteration or a milestone. I mean, Larry mentioned about not completing one of those milestones. I don't necessarily know that occurs as often as the entire milestone is not completed, right? So it's like clear expectations of what is it and what isn't it, and making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable team-wise to, you know, actually do what we're all, you know, talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, this is my second presentation of the day. I did one earlier on target value delivery, and part of that is exactly this: is it gives the advantage here of doing it like that is it gives the owner advantage of choice. Meaning, I want the front end to be really razzle dazzle, right? And because of that, I'm willing to sacrifice the back end a little bit more. And if you have it broken out, and you can provide that, then they can easily see what the difference is and what they'd have to be giving up. And it really helps them make that choice super early. So, you know, that's a huge advantage. It's a huge advantage for the owner, but in turn, it's a huge advantage for the rest of the team because it makes it more predictable. Next. Okay, so what do you do with that, all of that? We didn't even get to program yet. Look at all the stuff that you can do before you even, like, you know, do anything, right? That's durable. But so the programming and planning, if you have that, you know, you've really been able to lock in those decisions. You know, you brought everybody along. So that's going to release you to your program. Your functional program, you know, that's your flow and your adjacencies. Your space program, you're looking at size, you know, you're not really looking, and you're looking at adjacency, you know, and gradually you're refining that. So, you know, you start out with something that looks like this, it's kind of like an amoeba, you know, but you're really just looking at what are the adjacencies, you're concerned about that, and what are the key flow areas, and then from there you can take that and you can start analyzing separation for like what needs to be clean and what needs to be dirty, and can these things coexist or do they need to be separate? You know, you're starting to look at it that way. That helps move around your blocks. Next.
Yeah, an iteration is not necessarily a bad thing.
Functional program takes all that and lays it out from a code standpoint and an operational standpoint. You know, the nurse manager needs to be here and needs to be able to report here and needs dictation right here, or this needs to be a centralized versus a decentralized system because of the way that the patient spaces are laid out. I'm speaking a lot of healthcare because I'm a healthcare architect. And, you know, so how do you put that in? And then part of that also is how do you deal with that from an infection control standpoint and make that relevant? Because when you present that to the authority having jurisdiction, they're going to need all of that up front. The next level approach on the functional program that we've been doing with CDPH as a guide is you're having a discussion as early as you can on the logistics and the phasing, because then you can actually get that into the plan and you can understand that relationship that's going to be important to CDPH. You know, we're putting in a construction door here, but we're putting it into their clean environment. You know, need to really plan ahead for that. So that's the functional piece. Next. And then from there, your space program, you know, you're quantifying that. So again, all you're doing here is you're putting in what the code required is or what the program required is. A lot of the clients that we work with have standards. They have, and the standards could exceed the code, right? You know, so it's factoring all of that in, and then it's coming back and looking at the space. Okay, here's your standards, here's the code. You only have X amount of space available, so we know we have to do all of this, and let's have a conversation about the standards here, you know, as an example. But that allows you to do that. And within that too is that, you know, we talked about that continuous estimating. So as we're doing that, you can get some start to get some high level impact on estimating using information that Larry mentioned, you know, metric data and that kind of stuff, and start to ID those areas. And it can help the planners and the programmers, you know, if you can come in on the construction side and say, hey, look, we really need you to lay out your ISO rooms so they stack. It's going to be super efficient. It's going to be a lot more cost effective. You know, that's really good information that the planners could use very early on when they're laying out everything. So the concept refinement, you know, blobs to less blobby with more delineated flow to not a blob at all, right? Starting to look like a floor plan. Next. Planning tools. Value stream mapping. Who's done value stream mapping? Awesome. So, you know, that engagement, again, can happen early. And that's sitting down with all the departments, and you know, it's looking at the flow in the process and how that exists, right? Sometimes this is an isolated situation. It can exist on its own, and sometimes it's dependent on other departments, right? You take the example of you're laying out a whole pharmacy, right? That can be dependent on a number of different departments. So you got to look at the chain of that and analyze that to see, okay, where's the best use of this pharmacy to support all these needs? So, you know, we're doing a project right now with dietary, and it's like, okay, are we just going to be doing regular tray assembly lines and everybody's going to be coming down, or are we going to be doing on-demand kind of a, you know, nice hotel-y food service type approach? It changes the way you're looking at it. So being able to do that and do those flows and sequencing them through, you know, if you have enough space within the project where you can have those stations and just bring in the department staff, it's super great because sometimes they don't get to see each other. And if you have them rotating on stations, they're in proximity of each other. And one station might have a need that the other station didn't know they needed to respond to, and you can have that conversation right there. All right, so yeah, big room, big collaboration. This is kind of a monopoly board where we built it out with just foam core. We're a little old school. We do this more 3D nowadays. But you know, it visually, how often do you work with a client and you show them a 2D plan, you know, they don't even know what a door looks like, right? That's not their job, you know? But if we assume that and rely on that and they shake their head and go, yeah, and they don't know, you know, that's going to catch us up. So, you know, looking at that, what can we do early on to show that information so that we're we know that we're getting a durable decision from them because everybody understands what's happening. So a great way to advance a decision is in A3. This is just an example of something where we were looking at some egressing that needed to happen on a project. And so, having a clear problem statement that defines it, your analysis, what the team did to go and check it out. And here's some options, right? Here's some advantages to the options. And here's the proposal, and it's signed. That's the big part. Having the stakeholders involved in that process. So again, it's not somebody just mentioned earlier, the architect in the room on his own coming up with all this. That's not going to work, right? It takes a whole team. And then if you've identified the key stakeholders and they've signed off on it, now it's durable.
And you actually sent that around via like DocuSign, it looks like.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome.
DocuSign.
I've never seen that before. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that.
DocuSign equipment,
Yeah.
DocuSign, your life goals, I don't know, DocuSign until you can't DocuSign.
Yeah, but then you're making people recognize, you're recognizing that this is an important decision.
Yeah.
And I need your attention, and I need your involvement, and so that we can make this a durable decision.
And the people signing it will read it.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they are saying they agree with this recommendation. A lot of times you ask a group, everyone's good with this? Oh, yeah.
Whatever you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they should put their social security number out.
And they're next to kin. Yeah.
And I think the advantage is throughout the life cycle of the design, those people might change, but
Yep.
there is a history there. You know who made that decision at that point.
Yep.
And and the next person in line will understand the reasoning behind it. He can talk to that person.
And honestly, that looks like a lot of work. There's a lot of content in that. This is actually my A3. It didn't go the way I wanted it to.
He is upset.
It didn't take a ton of time. We went through it pretty quickly. It looks like a lot of work to put into it. But that decision made there, if we would have just made an assumption or designed it without having any buy-in from everybody, we had a negative iteration, but it come back and redo it again. Take the time to do it. Again, it wasn't a lot of time. It was really valuable.
Yeah, I would say one thing about getting signatures, most of the people in this room that work on hospitals, you know how long it takes before it finally opens. The CEO in most of my projects has switched at least once before, and then what kind of decisions did you guys make? And now you can show them.
And just to make sure I heard you correctly, you said it didn't take that long to put this together, but then you got a rejection from them when they saw what you were planning to do.
So rejection. You make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Based on the criteria that we weighted against, and they decided to go in a different direction.
Thanks. So it forced a decision for you.
Yeah,
very well.
it memorialized. All the A3 does is memorialize.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, you go back to your conditions of satisfaction. One of the conditions of satisfaction on this project that the whole team, even the executive suite, had agreed to is timely decision making. When we first started out the project, that read consensus-driven decision making. And so when we met with executive leadership, we were going over those and we said, we just want to make sure the priority's correct in these conditions and the order and the language. We got to this one and we said, do you really want it to be consensus-driven? And it was quiet for a little bit, and then the CEO was like, no, nothing's ever going to get done. But what we do need is we need all of the key stakeholders that are going to impact this decision to have weighed in. And then we need to make a timely decision, so it got changed.
Yeah, what are the facts?
Yeah.
An observation from the lens of pre-construction, estimating, is that these help tremendously. And I love the DocuSign example, it's beautiful. But there's so many iterations when it's a large team, if there's 150 or 50 or 20 or whatever, making all these decisions and phone calls and conversations. To have an A3 that can be referenced in an iteration of an estimate, a catalog. So in other words, in the estimate, it would literally say based on A3 number such and such.
Yeah.
That you can then go back and there's a very specific example of why, like historical relevance of why the estimate is changing.
Yep.
That's usually a challenge. It's like, well, how'd you get there?
Right.
You have to go back and look at all the prove all the documentation. So anyways, there's some synergy there with
Yeah.
this, and specifically to estimating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And having a project management system that allows you to be able to just find that
Sure.
and reference to it is better too, right? One source of truth. Awesome. I think I'm almost done. These guys are going to talk. We already talked about this. We kind of jumped the gun here. So I don't know if we need to revisit this. I think just for those that need a visual example, and I'm an architect, so I live in visionary things and color, which upsets some contractors. But this is a pie chart. Obviously, this represents total project cost, and these are some percentages of how the project might be split out. This could be this is the needs driven by the project. And so from this, you could help make an informed decision on setting your sub-targets. So you got your target, but if you just have an overall target that doesn't have any detail to it, right? Are you still really working with that target cost in mind, or are there a lot of plugs, in there? Hidden fees. So if you can break that down and make it a sub-target, and then you can assign leaders to those sub-targets with a cluster group, pit crew, however you strike team, Avengers Assemble, however you want to call yourselves, approach, now you can really start to get into a finer level of understanding of that target cost that can roll up to your total target cost.
Historic information should help you break it down. Looking at past projects.
Next. And then your RO log. So we talked about at the beginning here when you're first starting out, having it in having assumptions assigned to that's good, because you don't know. I have an assumptions log. One of the columns is wild ass guess. Because when you're starting out, that's what it is, right? So then over the course of that, you can take that and you can move them over, or the things that stay over there, they stay red and you never use them, right? But eventually you do want to navigate things over and get them into your RO log. This is just an example of an RO log. Example of what we talked about here is, those risks that get assessed. If you can't take them and cover that risk, right? And that comes back in and feeds into your contingency and then helps set that contingency amount. And it's all transparent. This should live not in, I know Ian very well, so not live in Ian's locker with his fancy shirts. But it should be available by all. And so again, if you have that software management system that can make it transparent and available to everybody, that's where it is. And why wouldn't you want that? Because again, we're all subject matter experts and last planners in our own right. So who better to assess these risks than the whole team, and not just like the contractor.
It eliminates the bottleneck too, when you're able to share the information with other people and they're vested in putting information in themselves or adding content to a risk or an opportunity, that it's like you're getting an informed decision, and it's something that just eliminates a bottleneck that usually exists by somebody championing, I'm the only one who has access to this or whatever.
Yeah, you got to pay me your lunch money.
Right.
Ownership is important, right?
Yeah.
Ownership is huge. When you feel like you own it and it's your thing or you're part of the thing, then you're not removing yourself from the outcomes, right? You're part of the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, make it all open to everybody. And review it often.
Review it often.
Okay, this is my slide. I'm going to bring us back to the last planner system. These are all great conversations, and we've got the time to have them. But I want to come back to this big idea of basing our activities and our milestones in design on decisions. That is a landmark change in the way all of our projects are run. And it's based on the classic last planner idea of making, of planning to release work. So finding out, like Justin has explained to us, all those different pieces of information that releases work. That's what we should be planning. Things like, a lot of the things that Justin, you're gonna see things like this a couple of times because it is the big idea behind the recent advancements in last planner design. So we're gonna take a few more minutes, do another little breakout session just to shake ourselves free a little bit. I'd like you to basically do the same thing, but as you did before, but this time ask yourself, what were some major decisions that have proven unreliable on your projects that were later changed. So, warm up those pens. Find Noah. Last time, could you throw out a couple? Noah, where'd you go, brother?
Deadlines,
Wait a minute, okay, let me recap. What are some major decisions that have proven unreliable on your projects that were later changed? So, deadlines are a decision, so yeah, right, deadlines changed.
Yeah.
Any other decisions that were unreliable?
We had a change in contract terms.
Oh.
Like just minor ones, though, right?
I mean, it's just a little thing, right?
You're gonna read it. Like,
Not a while.
That's a good one.
Another unreliable decision.
Not engaging the end user early on in design.
So the decision was to just bypass them because they're not important.
We planned in silos without their influence. And
Interesting.
maybe changing it.
Users bypassed. Go ahead.
Not going into detail when one should have gone into detail. Not going too far, but not far enough.
So there was a decision made to curtail the detail. And
Well,
go
not
forward?
necessarily being cognizant of that, but the team in the I don't want to get into the specifics, but staying too far aggregate when it was quite clear after it shook out, where the team should have went to the next step of detail to understand, was it truly the right decision? And then knowing when not to go too far in, where, it's just a bunch of noise,
Do you mean
understanding what that,
Do you mean when presenting or when actually designing?
when actually design, the decisions, like, we're going to do this over this,
Yeah.
but maybe not, you're thinking too high level, and in that specific situation, you should have went a little bit deeper.
Right. Wasn't durable.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, good way to say it.
Yeah, well, a lot of times there's a factor that should have been considered.
Sure.
Stop
Whatever
too
that-
quick and you
Yep.
pick that up.
No, I didn't know your hand. One that we didn't write was certainly pressing it to our group was not understanding who all the stakeholders were. So we made a lot of decisions knowing all the right stakeholders weren't present.
Some
Yeah.
important person that you didn't know about.
Yeah,
Did you ask Bob?
So figuring out all the stakeholders, the appropriate stakeholders are in the beginning, obviously matters.
Yeah.
Going in with an assumption of, well, clearly this is a kickoff meeting, everyone is here, let's start making decisions.
Yeah.
And that proved to be
That's a good
not
one.
fatal, but some rework.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Those are, go ahead. Even Tom had one.
What I've done wrong one time is not I, but as a team, we didn't write down the decisions taken.
That's a decision.
And it's pretty obvious, right, that we should have it in writing, but we discussed this long enough and we thought it's all clear. And after a few months, this came back and said, we can't find an email or a note or anything that, yeah, but we just called it.
Well, if I may add to that, because I've seen
Yeah.
this a lot, maybe you put it down, but it's not articulate. Yeah, you can find it,
Right. Yeah.
but it's so vague that, it's like, what did Bob say?
Yeah.
Decided on this day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good
Those
one.
are all great. Those are all great. And they lead right into our next section about making durable decisions. We've decided that decisions release design work, and if they're made, you make good decisions, then the design will be efficient. So Ron's going to talk to us a little bit about.
Yeah, and as you look at this list, a lot of it is just what you said, involving the right people. Do you have the right stakeholders? And if you don't have the right stakeholders, you can't make a decision, is the way I would look at it. Yeah, because someone will come in later and change everything because of their viewpoint. It might be the CEO, the COO. It might be somebody that has knowledge, specific knowledge that should have been included in that decision. So that's part of it. Setting goals, you need a condition of satisfaction, a charter. You need to know where true north is. Because you're going to make a decision, you got to base it on the project. Right? And then identifying alternatives or options. Now, in a set-based design early on, like Justin said, you have a wide variety of different possibilities. They get narrowed down. And then when you get it narrowed down, you end up, a lot of times we'll end up choosing by advantages. When we get it to 2 or 3 or 4 items, you don't want to do much more than that because it takes a lot of time and detail. And then the factors that help you make a decision. Now that's a session that has to be done with the stakeholders. If you don't have the right stakeholders in the room, coming up with the factors and criteria, how we're going to evaluate these alternatives, then you're wasting your time. You need to have them in the room when you're doing that. And then when you're evaluating advantages, and you're kind of getting a quick feel of the alternatives and what the differences are between them. So even when you're generating factors, it's good to generate factors that have a difference between the alternatives so that there will be an advantage will come out of that. And the idea behind it is once everybody has their voice and their opinion is taken, then you're building consensus. Because at that point in time, you're committed 100% to delivering the project. And then just what was said about documenting decisions, A3s with the DocuSign, can't beat that. You get everybody to sign in, and now you've got a record of how the decision was made and based on what the costs were.
You have 100% commitment. Don't vote. You don't want 51% to be on your side and 49% to be against you. It's got to be 100%. Or keep working on it. There's a question.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, I should make sure. Do you guys have an issue with like the human element as well in terms of identifying stakeholders? Because I feel like that's a big net that can cast, and you know, some people who are just like, this is who, you know, this is. I guess if you make it more of like a collaborative element, it's a little easier, right? So it's not one person just being like, these are who I think the stakeholders are.
Yeah.
That's probably what helps to
I mean, a lot of times on the hospital projects, you got clinicians, or if you're talking about an OR, you got that expert that's going to voice their opinion. But we still have the COO and the CEO and the GCs and the trade partners and the designers and the engineers. All of those people are stakeholders in that decision because they all have expertise in different areas, and voicing that opinion of what they see is good for everybody to hear.
Yeah, I just wonder if sometimes it starts to feel like you've almost like unraveled a little bit too much, right? You start getting, some of the users or some of the folks where you're kind of like maybe corral some of that.
And maybe you can't
balance. You want to know what they know.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need.
And it's hard to know who knows what they know.
Right, everyone's experience and bias is a little different, but getting that information out to everybody, it really helps make a decision.
So you don't forget a factor that you wish you had considered.
Yeah.
If I could add to that, bringing the end users in and making them part of the team, is a great way to help with that, because you might not know the client's full structure, so you might not know how far the rabbit hole needs to go, and you really shouldn't be the one that's making that decision because you're on the outside. But what you can do is you can have a meeting with the end user team or the leadership team or the contacts that you have, and you can show them the schedule, and you can show them, here are the points that you're a part of this, right? You need first patient, or you need doors open, or food on the table, at this date and time. And so backing up from that, this is our process that's going to get you there. And this is a schedule that we can commit to, but you play a role in that too. We're going to need these decisions by this date, and we'll meet routinely to review this, but we need you to be able to come in and give us those decisions to help us all together to stay on that path. And then let them do that, because then they feel committed to. It's like Tom was mentioning, you're part of that process. So then you feel really engaged, and then you're actively, helping. So that's a good way to do it.
And then get buy-in, right? Yep. So whenever the decision's made, they were part of it, and now they're going to endorse that decision because they had their say.
A lot of times they bring in an element that you're it's from their personal experience of ergonomics. There are certain ergonomics they prefer, certain work stuff inside that operating room. That is their preference. It's not wrong. It's not right. It's just their preference, and you need to. They're gonna live with that final product. So we wanted to make it as I think as user friendly as possible.
Yeah, I like outlining it all, because if you give them the information of this is what I'm expecting from you, even if they go, I'm not that person, let me find that person.
Yeah.
I think that's really the key to solving that.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, this is a great example.
So this is an example of decision-based milestone. And we started this portion of the project. We really had the program developed, the number of stories for the bed tower, the square footage, the number of beds. All of that had been pretty much done. And then we got challenged on where the bed tower was going to go on the site. And that came in really from the top. The director of design and construction flew in from Pennsylvania to be there when we did the CBA, because he wanted to get his say. And I guess he had a bad experience on another hospital project where they put a bed tower and he came out, he didn't like the location. Yeah. And to me, his viewpoint was more curbside. You know, there's a main road here, we need to advertise. We got a freeway there, they need to see us. You know, those kind of things. And not so much worried about the program. You know, we had the clinicians and the CO and all the people that were going to help make sure that we had the right program. It was like, where does it go on the site? And so we had 3 alternatives that we were going to look at. And one being where it had been master planned lightly, years when the hospital was first built. And so what we ended up doing was doing a CBA process and went through, identified factors and criteria, and then evaluated these locations to try to find out what one would be the best for the project. So it was this decision that would release the team to move forward. Until we knew where it was at, all we could do was program. So this is a good example.
It's just enough design, though, to help you evaluate the factors that people were considered might release some valuable advantages.
Yeah, well, like orientation for energy. So mechanical had, here's how I think this thing needs to go. This is to be the advantage if we orient it this way. There was a number of different factors where was the connectivity to the existing bed tower. You know, was it adjacent or did we have to build something to connect to it? And then it was walking distances to imaging or to the ORs or to the ED. You know, all those kind of things were going to play into where's the best location. And then even on the site, there was, you know, the site had been developed with a certain location in mind. So the utilities were laid out such that they expected it to go there. Now we're going to introduce 2 other locations, and now those costs had to be gathered, and the schedule, you know, it impacted schedule a lot too.
But you can imagine a room full of people and you're just asking them, what do you think are factors that could result in some powerful advantages for these 3 options?
Yeah.
And you get things that, you know, no one person would have ever thought of.
How long did it take for you to have that conversation?
Well, we started building the CBA probably about 2 weeks before we actually had everybody in the room to do the work. So we took time to get the attributes, you know, and make sure that everybody was happy with the factors and criteria, how we were going to evaluate it. And then once we got sign off on that, then it was to get everybody in a room.
Usually you don't start with a blank piece of paper. You get a smaller group of experts together and they do the best they can, and then you bring in additional ones and say, did we forget a factor? What do you think of these factors? Did we miss one? They go, oh, well, what about this? Oh, well, let's add that. But you're not necessarily starting with 25 people on a blank piece of paper.
Yeah, and sometimes there'll be factors that come up that there's no advantage for the alternatives. And so we just roll it under in a spreadsheet, but it's there because someone was going to come back later and say, did you guys consider this factor? I don't see it. And then, yeah, but there was no advantage.
Like you might say safety.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is, but there's no difference in the level of safety between the alternatives, then that factor doesn't yield any advantage.
And one of the big ideas that came out, that's one of the factors, I don't think it's showing up here because it was like 13 factors, was wayfinding. So it was patient experience and HCAP scores. That was one of the big things they were pushing on this project. And really it was family members that were going to come visit somebody that was in this hospital. And so on wayfinding it was, what's the distance to get to the elevator tower for that bed tower?
And how complicated.
And how many turns did it take to get there? So we counted every turn, and that was a big thing because the more turns, the better chance someone getting lost. And so that was one of the key factors.
You can see in the process, you're breaking down what an architect would normally do in their head or on the side. And you've transformed it into a way that everybody can understand.
Yeah.
The number of steps or the number of feet. So now you're getting more people to participate in the design and making it more transparent and having a much better idea or a much better chance of it being a durable decision.
And I imagine that you allowed yourself a couple of weeks to go through this process before which you needed to have this decision made by.
Yeah. So we had this targeted point in time where this decision had to be made so we could release the team. And so, until this decision was made, we're holding horses back, right? And as soon as we made a decision, then it was full go. Yeah.
But this is the kind of decision that could drag on for months and months and months if there isn't a process to bring it home.
In the balanced scorecard, how do you come up with the value for weight?
So that is done based on the stakeholders in the room. What's the most important? We call it the paramount advantage. And in this case was connectivity, that they wanted the hospital to have a connection at all floors. There was one case where we only had one floor connected, and it obviously got 0, but the other ones get 100 if they could make a connection. Now, 2 of them had to build over the top of existing hospital, and so they had connectivity, but it showed up in the cost and the schedule, which was end up being negative for them, right? But for connectivity, they could achieve it. And so the group as a whole then went through and weighed how important each of those advantages were.
Based on the 100 points for the connectivity at each floor. Is this more important than that or less important than that? Well, how much less?
And it's a pretty big deal, because if you look at the comparison of some of the numbers that came up, it's 100. Some of the other decisions or the advantages were not that high, right?
Site disruption. But you don't know it until you have these discussions.
Yeah.
And find out what people really think.
Yeah, see, if you don't know about CBA's process, we just did a training on this. My friends over here did a training on this a while back. I know it was Pleasant Hill. But we'll be doing another one next year. Please go to LCI's website. They have just kind of a free run through it. So it's kind of complicated, but it's easy to understand when someone walks you through it.
Yeah. The exercise we do is pretty simple. And when you walk out of the room, you'll be able to use CBA in your life. I'm going to buy a car. I got 3 possible cars. Or, one person came back and it told me about they sent their daughter to college. They used the CBA process on all the colleges. Cost being a factor at the very end, but So anyway, it's a good process. So if you haven't learned CBA, we'll do this again.
Yeah, just a disclaimer on that. Be careful how you use it, because in your personal relationship, maybe not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah, my wife was buying a car. I was doing a CBA on the side, but I never told her.
That's how she ended up with 3 cars.
That's it, yeah. And so here's what we're talking about, documenting the decision. So once we had consensus, we had the right stakeholders, we can make a decision. And then one of the things that made this decision easy was that the least expensive was the one that had the most advantages. Generally not the case, right? It's usually the one that has the most advantages is the most expensive, and now you've got to determine, is it worth the extra cost to get those advantages? But this one was simple. As it turned out, we did not put the new bed tower where it was originally planned.
So you put it on the west?
Put it on the northwest side, so the one in, that had the green one that had the direct connectivity.
Does cost on the right side?
And the cost is across the bottom, and then the advantages are the vertical scale. So the far left is the least expensive. And they weren't big differences between them, but it was a quick validation that this is the way to go. This is the best place.
Yeah, the scale is the value of all the advantages.
Yeah.
Not the cost. So
Yeah.
the blue on the left had the most advantages, and the cost is along the bottom.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's actually the least expensive. Maybe easy. And it should be easy. When you're done, you should have total confidence that you did it.
Yep.
One of the things on this for the CBA, when we talk about target value delivery, we're also talking about, we're not talking about just first cost. So, the advantages can play into that too. If you have a first cost number that's high, but then you're looking at the whole target value of it, and that includes post occupancy, and you're taking in that realization, those numbers might be different when you look at it from a total life standpoint. So, that's a more in-depth conversation, but really if you're looking at the difference between a target value design, right, versus a target value delivery, you're looking at the before the project starts and you're looking at after the project too. So that could be helpful.
All right, now I'm going to take us home here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some examples of actually using Last Planner system to use these kind of milestones and activities that we've been talking about and releasing work during the design phase. So I'm going to talk about a few simple ideas. We talked about durable decisions, releasing work reliably, not using meaningless milestones, but actually defining what we're trying to accomplish in the conditions of satisfaction. That's an excellent exercise. If you ever want to learn a lot, ask a room full of people what design development means, and you learn a lot about why not to use that as a milestone. So I'm going to kind of walk through some of the ways. This is just an example of a way that a design phase might go if you were using activities that release work. About basing your activities on design decisions, And some of this is going to sound familiar, and that's good. We want you to walk away with this as a solid understanding. And this, I'm kind of imagining a validation phase, that ends with a validation phase complete, which includes owner-approved functional plans, a validated budget and schedule, and the major systems selected. That's the conditions of satisfaction for this imaginary validation phase. And these are the kind of activities that one would expect. We've been talking about a validated program, a target value budget, and maybe there's a stretch goal to it, those two elements leading into massing studies, successful massing studies leading into preliminary functional plans, which are used to engage user meetings with, a series of user meetings that will tend to update those functional plans as more data is achieved. But this process of going, one level of functional plan, one user meeting, an updated functional plan, another user meeting, another updated. You're going through this process of getting their buy-in, which ultimately leads to some sort of a mock-up that you can get owner feedback from, and then a final for validation functional plan leading to those owner-approved functional plans that you want. And along the way, you're improving the target budget. You might take this first, you might decide that you want to take the results of this first user meeting and use that set of data to begin the process of system selections. And you would use that point as a time to update the budget and see what progress we're making towards our targets. And then after you've got some information together on some refined options and one more improvement on the functional plans, another target budget review, another improvement. so that you're going through this kind of a process, all based on the decisions that are making either in the systems or in costing or in functional plans or in user feedback to work your way toward your goal of a completed validation. So these are the kind of activities that we should be planning. You don't see anything about floor plans, you don't see anything about elevations, no sections, no any of that. We're looking at the activities that you really need to make in the order that you really need to make them to reach your goal at the end. So that, I think, is the one of the big takeaways that we'd like you to lead with, is this idea of planning with this kind of activity as opposed to the ones that are traditionally used, which are drawing based and don't necessarily don't release design work, and they aren't necessarily reliable. The other concept is releasing work, releasing design work. And that another way to look at planning activities is in specifically what they release. I mean, the classic ask is to have floor plans frozen or a structural model fixed or something like that. And if you dig into that request, you'll find that what they're trying to do is release their work. And they don't need a model, they don't need a floor plan, they need information. So if you can start creating your tasks with the idea of releasing information that leads to a specific task, you'll find those are a lot more reliable. For example, this one, structural foundation drawings, but then you add release for rebar fabrication detailing. Not everything in the world that has to do with foundations hasn't been set, but then I know that I need to have the rebar quantified in a way that detailing can progress. Now I know what you really want. I know what I really need to provide. Same sort of thing with the structural design model. If I know that I'm releasing it for fabrication detailing, then I know what needs to go into those drawings because I know what fabricating needs. It's not 50% CDs or anything like that. It's based on that release. Same kind of idea for architectural. Rather than saying architectural frozen floor plan, you might say something like architectural wall layout, area 1, released for framing bin. Because you've had a conversation and they just don't want the walls to move. You know what I mean? Everything about the plan doesn't have to be fixed. It's the walls that we're going to work with. So let's make a specific release just for that, as opposed to as something generic. Sure.
Observation very quick. I found that you're right. The tension to release something is big, and most every project that I've been involved in.
Right.
The hesitation isn't necessarily releasing. It's like they don't want to be responsible for releasing something. When I say they, designers or whatever, don't want to pull the trigger fast because there tends to be a little bit of insecurity, maybe there's a better word, but of the possible ramifications of releasing something and the quagmire that could happen. And so sometimes that releasing maybe is entitlement from upper management, that it says it's okay to do that. It's okay if there's a quagmire later on. You're not going to be pulled on the table for it. But it's sometimes a professional hesitation of the ramifications if they release too early. It's an observation.
Yeah. No, it's a good observation. And one thing you can do along with a release, you can have a conversation and you can quantify it. You can say, I'm releasing just this one area because I know that the user group meetings have been completed. I've got sign off from this department and that doctor. So I'm comfortable releasing this one area. Can you guys just start on that while I finish this other stuff? And then we'll start to phase the work. Or, yeah, if you want a release, I'll give you a release, but I got one more user meeting. And I promise I will tell you everything that goes on in that meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing is like the communication that you prep for after the fact. Like that's a big thing that we have where we've been doing these releases, but we're saying there is a caveat that changes might come, but we are going to communicate every single change that comes just so that it's not going to be a landslide of, oh, this plan is completely different from what I saw. So we're like, we do weekly change tracking sets and just, letting people know, hey, this shifted a little bit. This is why. If you want more information, we can talk about it. If it's a problem, we can also talk about it. So.
But if I know what I'm releasing, then I know what, if I change something that pertains to that, I'm obligated to communicate it. If you know what I mean, it's a much different approach to when you start thinking about releasing information as opposed to finishing drawings.
Another easy thing would just be to invite the estimator into the user group meeting.
We did that with the look and feel meeting. It went excellent.
They can go, no, you can't afford that. She's just being nice. Don't listen to her.
Well, no joke. There was one time I said on a pretty major project, you saw a commitment on the screen, and it was a Zoom call, and I said, well, that added 800, almost $1 million. It was just one little idea. I got a text that said, stop talking. That's a problem.
Who's dumb enough to do that?
That's a big problem. Yeah, and that project had a problem because, there was a issue with, bringing estimators in the room, but not giving them the credibility or the ability to speak a free mind because of politics.
Yeah.
And it's culture. Yeah, you're right.
It's a dysfunction.
I want you on my team.
But that takes a lot of the weight off of the designers who, we got to work with these people, okay? And we can't, having somebody else to help back us up when there's bad news to deliver can be really bad.
Yeah.
So no, but the whole idea of talking about releasing specific information can make that handoff a lot more reliable. But it's a new concept. You don't see that very often. There once was a time when you issued a 4 construction document set. Does anybody ever remember? Anybody remember those? No, where you would say, "This is the set we're going to build from." Yeah. No, it never happens. Never happens on any of my projects.
Honestly, lots of time in the government, I feel like still. A project just a couple months ago.
Yeah, well, it doesn't happen on enough of my projects.
Lucky man.
But there's an actual set of drawings. This is what we're building from. So finding some way to quantify your work before you give it out. You don't know what it's going to get used for if you're done.
I just did an event in Southern California with a client who will remain nameless that had that. They had issue for construction, and they had issue for bid, and they had issue for permit, and they were all different dates with all different drawing sets. And through the course of 2 days, we were able to get them to be okay with the idea that all of those could be one thing.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Okay, just the recap, which maybe I've recapped it enough. These are all the ways that we want to start rethinking the design phases and improve them. And like I say, there's a lot of people smarter than us that have written a lot more on it that you can go to and find out more information if you want. Thank you very much.
Oh, cartoons.
It is what, 7:30 at the latest? No, it's almost 8 o'clock. I don't know, but we're right on time.
Yeah.
You can entertain any more questions or?
Did you want to read any of what some of the
I think
things that
before
weren't
they-
talked about?
Before they answer questions, I just want to acknowledge a couple of people in the room. These are all volunteers, but as far as I know, none of them are getting paid. Whoa. I don't know because I got to approve the expenses. So
I told Tom he's paying my fee for being here.
He should pay.
Okay.
Tom's gonna pay. But everybody that you see presenting today, they just volunteered, like Larry Champion, so behind the scenes with Sully, and a few other people on the team. Candace got involved to get us this beautiful space that we could be in today. So it's volunteers in this community that make these types of events happen. So they're being way too humble. If you have questions about implementing anything that you saw, these are the experts that I'm gonna call when I need something, so call them. And if you don't have their email address, I'll give it to you. So you can get in contact with them, but each one of them is a genius in the work that they do, so please feel free to connect with them, keep the conversations going, and ask your questions now, because you're gonna help somebody sitting next to you that's not asking. So please pepper them with a lot of stuff.
One last thing I wanted to bring up is if you aren't getting our emails for all of our events, if you guys want to touch base with me and give me your card, let me know, because we have so many more coming up, and they're all very valuable. Thanks.
I wanted to make a comment. You guys were right on time. Very difficult stuff. You guys conveyed it very well, but also I appreciate your open mind. I've had presenters say, well, that's not how we do it. But just from right out of the gate, you guys kept an open mind, and the communication was fantastic in the room. And I really appreciate listening to presenters that are very real and that listen to other perspectives, and my hat's off to you. Very interesting.
Well, we're here to learn too.
Sure.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, we're learning as we get questions and as we get feedback. So.
Yeah, the continuous improvement is key.
Well, it's clear you believe that.
Yeah.
Here. I see it and hear it. Very well done.
I'm just curious as far as the makeup of the room, because I don't know a lot of you. How many GCs do we have in the room? How about trade partners and designers? Okay.
We're missing a big one.
And engineers?
A bigger one.
Oh.
Owners.
Owners. Yeah. Owners? That's probably the most important people to be in this room.
Oh, I did it as a designer.
Yeah.
I had to stop myself from putting together.
Probably hard to do.
Yeah.
You missed suppliers.
Oh, yeah. Suppliers. Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. It's a good cross section, and I was curious when we were going to do this presentation. We talked about design and last planner. Who would be interested in hearing kind of the latest on what we're thinking on how to deliver projects? And so it's great to see such a great cross section. So appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the important part for me is that we've seen last planner. I mean, I know the last planner presentation, which some people in this room probably don't know all the ins and outs of last planner, but I've been doing last planner for 15 years now.
Yeah.
And the important part about this is that it's really, to Larry's point, it's talking about information is the important part, right?
Yeah.
But what it's driving towards is, because we know how to plan our tasks, but when I do a full plan now with people, they want to plug in DD. It's like, this is 150. Put in literally 4 tags, and I'm like, I'm done. Okay, sorry, put RCPs, floor plan, this is, what's important to the client, or when I say client, I mean the downstream client, right?
Yeah.
Next person in line.
And, I get pulled into different pool planning sessions that are having issues. And so some of the basic concepts that we see that don't get picked up is milestone planning. Number one, the team doesn't know what the sequence of the project is. They don't know how many increments. Is there make-ready work that's going to be going on at the same time? And just big chunks of time to all the way to the first patient day. At one project, we had done a initial pool plan, and we went right to the very end and said, this is the day we turn it over to the owner. And they're going, whoa, 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 no. We needed 6 weeks before that to get our furniture into that building. That's the first day everybody shows up. And so right out of the gate, we just did the first big milestone plan. We're 6 weeks behind, right? And it changed the way we delivered the project. We had to find ways of delivering it faster. And we knew on day one, so that was the key, is that bad news early is good news because you can do something about it. And so on the first day, we knew that we had to make up 6 weeks. Yeah.
Let me bring up one that maybe we didn't get talked about. And one person put up fire protection requirements. And it just made me think that there are a lot of outside agencies that are very difficult to plan for. And the fire marshals is a classic example, and there are others.
Oh, yeah.
You know, can we ask, how do you make that more reliable when you're asking for input from people that are notoriously unreliable?
Yeah, well, so the event I
hope
just
there aren't
did.
any in the room.
if I can talk about that, and the event that I just did last week, the project in Southern California, nobody had ever done pole planning before, and so what you were just talking about, you know, Ron, what we decided to do was we did a 2-day event, and the first day event was a primer event. We did a whole day of design charrette, and we did it out on site, and everybody walked the site and looked at all the spaces to be. And that really helped everybody. And in that event, a lot of risks and opportunities were identified. And then when we started the pole plan the very next day, we started out with summarizing those risks and opportunities, and we put them all up on the board. And then we said, we want that all put into the plan. And it allowed them to put that in, instead of just putting in their normal, this is what a drawing I would give. It allowed them to put in how they would deal with those risks and what they would need from others to be able to deal with them early on. And at the end of the day, we were able to close out all the risks that we had listed and all the opportunities because they were all now in the plan.
Wow.
So, and the fire marshal came up into that, and it prompted the same response. This is always a delay. They're notorious to work with, especially locally here. What are the things that we can do? So very early on, a preliminary meeting was set with the city to start to sort through that, right? And start to engage well before the critical path would have required that, you know, response. So, you know, and sometimes the agencies want to work with us, and we should invite them in. We've had agencies that want to come into the big room. They want to be part of those sessions, and you know, the team should take advantage of that. But oftentimes they don't want to be, right? So, you know, how do you do that? You know, so there's ways that you can get out ahead of that to give yourself maybe not the for sure answer, but a little bit more dependency on getting somewhere.
One good example of that the trend is doing exactly what you're doing, is working with Oshkosh. You know, that's a trend now of getting them involved early, and what the industry is finding out in healthcare, and certainly hospitals, is that they want to be involved early for the most part. And so, you know, so that's, Oshkosh, I think, could even be more complex than the fire marshal because it touches everything. So anyway, there is a...
Yeah.
And at least recognizing those risks, I mean, looking at past data and doing the best we can. You know, we're the professionals. We don't know nothing, so we should at least be including those risks and doing what we can to buffer and protect the plan against it.
I think another common risk I see a lot of pool planning is making commitments on behalf of a third party person.
Yeah.
If you have like a trade partner that is going to influence the design, and you're trying to guess how much time they're going to take, they're going to need to develop a drawing or a set of criteria, it's always unpredictable.
Yeah.
And trying to educate the team about that and get that information from that third party person directly, I think is the best way of navigating it.
Yeah, start by documenting those risks. And look at historical data and do what you can to buffer. I don't know what else to say.
So we were talking earlier about stakeholders to be involved. Definitely facilities.
Yeah.
We've seen from time to time the VE word come out, and then facilities is handed a building that they have no idea how to run. I think in comment to Oshkosh is making sure that you have your IOR invested early in the project. They are a key player for your plan review and your team review. And what is needed, exactly. So I mean, that's kind of my
Yeah, that's a great point.
100% agree.
The only other thing I'd say about that, those age days are great to have there if you can. But like, they will never be there if you don't invite them. The last owner I spoke to about that, they're like, oh no, we're not going to invite them. God only knows what'll happen if they show up. And I'm like, if you keep them at arm's distance, like you can't trust them, they will always be at arm's distance, and you won't be able to trust them. So like, they are human beings. They don't have two heads.
And if you're working off transparency, what do you have to hide? You know, that's kind of the bigger question. Is like, well, what's going on here?
I can't speak for the whole center operations, but as an attitude to Oshpod is the end game. So we deal with Oshpod a lot, or any HJ.
Yeah.
But I don't want what we do, right? Like our job is that everybody who can help us be successful and needs to be engaged or at least thought about.
Yeah.
You know, like or keeping people at arm's length. That's a great metaphor. No. Like I'm doing a presentation plug for next month, and somebody made a great point about being a fly on the wall. Right? Oh, just come to the meeting and be a fly on the wall. I don't want flies on my walls. I want people who are invested in my raise your hand 40 times today. Raise your hand and make a comment. Ask a question. Be involved. Because at least now we've got a conversation.
Yeah.
We try to solve the risk that Justin talked about. Otherwise, we're just like, everything's great. We go away. We come back the next week. Nothing happened. We're all unhappy because we're unsuccessful. We didn't meet commitments because we didn't get engaged.
Yeah.
We thought we had it all figured out.
I'd be very interested in an activity to do, like a last planner activity, just to see how it goes for design, because it's very easy. I've done it for construction where it's sequential. You have this activity, then you do this activity, and then you do this activity. And I've led it for design, where it turns into this spider web of things that this has to happen for this person, this has to happen for this person. So if there's an activity that could be developed to, for my greedy sake of, how is this done? Because it's hard to try to get all these design teams and an owner engaged on when they need to be involved in it, and then the GC, how do they manage the design when it's not really their design, and so on. So how would be a fun activity of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you some fundamentals of what the process is, and number one is preparation, right? We like to hand out homework that you have to write down what you're going to deliver, and it needs to be in detail for whatever package it is. Whatever the name of it is, you need to spend the time so that everybody knows exactly what they need to deliver. And we have our trade partners and builders input on what they need for that milestone. That's number one. Once you have that, then you need to engage the whole team and go over their homework that they're prepped so that they can start building their tags in whatever software, or writing tags if you're going to just put them on the wall before you get in the room, right? And then the number one thing that we've seen, especially healthcare, is we build everybody's flow off the architectural flow, because they got the user meetings, they got the ASJ, and they have interaction with the whole team. And so we will establish their flow first. You remember when we put stickies on the wall for Santa Rosa? And then everybody else then has their own requirements of what they need to do. And then they also have their requests of what they need for them to do their work. And that spurs all the conversations of understanding the sequence and the network of commitments and handoffs.
It seems like it's faster to just have everybody crash the wall, but that gets to a spider.
Well, just to go back, because I don't want to let that go. If you want to do a hands-on event, I just need 5 people to commit. We're doing one for the city of San Francisco and SFO in October. So if you want to help me find 5 other people that want to participate, we'll create an October event and we'll add a hands-on LPS and design workshop.
And speaking of October, shameless plug, but Congress, if you're going to attend the Learning Day, the afternoon half-day session, one of them is an intermediate last planner in design.
In design.
I'm teaching the beginning course that leads into that. It's a half-day morning course. If you attend the intermediate one, you're going to be doing design pull planning. It's a hands-on course.
One of the things he said, you said pre-con.
Yeah.
Which is
design and pre-con.
But to me, like, there's one for pre-con, which I get design. But is pre-con and design, are they coupled? I mean, realistically, and I'll tell you what, I'm in poll sessions all the time. I'm the only one putting estimating things on the poll, right?
Yeah.
No one's thinking about what does the estimator need. I shouldn't say no one. I don't mean to speak in absolutes. My apologies. But it's very rare that that it's like, well, what does the estimator need? What do we need to do for them to get the accurate
There you go.
the meaning of the measure? In other words, what are we measuring, and what does it cost, and what do you need?
Yeah.
And this isn't one time, it's like maybe 99, 98, 95%, plus or minus 30%, I'm an estimator. But anyway, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The estimator shouldn't be the only one putting those restraints on the wall, because if
It begs the question, which was another very interesting discussion at this year's design forum. We want to get these events that get a lot of attention and carry these conversations. What's the result? What's the role of the design manager?
Interesting.
And that it takes into consideration pre-con, because if you talk to an architect, they're like, pre-con's a bad word.
Well, we call it pre-con.
Yeah.
Construction is post-design.
But then if you look at it, and you look at it, what are we trying to do, and what's the best role of a design manager? That's an active discussion. Who's best to be doing that, and what exactly are they doing?
Right.
So that was such a big conversation that I believe it's also going to be in Congress as well.
Yeah, and when we're setting up milestones, when we're developing the master strategy, and then we go to the first milestone, there's 3 questions that get asked for that milestone is, what are we contractually obligated? What does the owner have in his contract? What do we need as a team to coordinate our effort? And what do the estimators need so that they can get their cost estimate from that package?
All right, so let me ask you a question. I love that third one, right? They're all important. But is someone that's not an estimator, now let's think about this for a second, qualified to answer that question? I would say no.
No, but it would be the estimator answer.
It would be the estimators, which means estimator systemically, not just one estimator, but the estimating team and its philosophy needs to be a stakeholder in that to answer that question correctly.
100%.
Yep, you're right on the money.
Just as a point of order, we're over time. So if anyone needs to leave, don't let us hold you hostage. We'll do this all night long. Don't feel bad.
I blocked out my calendar 2 days.
I think that's like a little bit right, because when we talk about what's traditionally in a DD package, we've had that conversation come up of like, is the DD, is it just a set of drawings, or are we trying to cram as much content in there so that budget can be updated based on that?
Yeah.
How are those drawings going to be viewed to create?
And so I think instead of talking about changing that language, this isn't a budgeting set, this is a budgeting set, or this is a set that has this information.
Yeah. Or it could also be something that releases procurement strategy.
Exactly, yeah.
So for really long lead items.
Discussion needs to be very focused on where we were asked for the set, and then we were defined, I want to see this, and this, and this. And the GC was in the room, sitting there, pre-called, didn't say a word. What's the set, said no. And then we got an email back about 2 days later saying, I don't have any information. And I'm like,
That's lazy. It's lazy. It's lazy from the estimator, because it's not the estimator who. That is the estimator's role to say at that time, I don't have enough information.
Yeah.
Or not. To me, it's the laziest thing to do is to say, oh, I can't update it because I don't have enough.
All right, good job, thanks.
Put the assumptions in that always have, you should always have 100% number. And the experience that you went through is not a professional situation for us. Because they should have said, based on what we heard, here's the budget, here's the criteria and assumptions that we made.
And we'll design to those.
Or maybe it's wrong. But at least it's the problem with the estimating side is that there's a lot of people that twiddle their thumbs. And I'm an estimator, so I'm talking about my folks.
1 minute group picture, come on.